Matthias. I'm glad to be here talking about threat modeling. As you can see from the title, it's a pretty practical topic. Often threat modeling presentations are very abstract. This is very much based on a specific tool that is a Microsoft threat modeling tool that I happen to, you perhaps might think why Microsoft threat modeling tool and in that specific version. I came to that last year, it was in October or something, when some customer selected this and said to me, okay, I have to implement this into his organization. And, but I think he kind of selected this tool just by Googling for threat modeling, came to that. And so I was a bit, shocked, and then I Googled and saw that there's a new version that's actually kind of cool because it lets you customize lots of things and is really something that I guess many are looking for, although that's pretty much Windows-centric. So I'm happy to be here to share this experience that I gained with implementing this tool the last more or less eight months in this larger organization, and share this knowledge. Before I start, so I have lots of demonstration. So with the Microsoft tool, what could possibly go wrong? But before I start with this demonstration and come to this tool, I give you a little bit of context where it is in this threat modeling universe. There's lots of words, concepts around, and after this, I get you a little bit conclusion. So about me, very short. So I've dedicated basically all my professional life, that is more than 12 years, to building secure software applications, especially integrating that into larger organizations. I wrote a book that is in German, so you have to learn German before you can read it. I don't know if it's worth it, but you can perhaps try. And yes, just starting motivation. I think many of you who are here know that it's a good idea to start very early with security and then consistently in every phase. And one reason for that is, of course, if you want to have a secure house, you need a strong fundament and you can't change the fundament later. You need to address this early. And I'm a lot in larger organizations, and I see that there's this third point there. It's the fourth actually. That more and more architectural security requirements are demanded from project teams, internal project teams, and they're struggling with that because they don't know how they can check if they meet these requirements. And we have not so many things there in this phase. I can normally call these two phases, specification and design phase, conceptual security phase. So we have lots of coding check tools and dynamic testing tools after that, but not so much there that can help project teams identifying what security problems they have to think about. So threat modeling. I think there are lots of definitions about threat modeling. I use this as just my definition. Threat modeling is a structured approach for identifying potential security problems that are threats within the software specification or design. So you can use this within the software specification or design phase. So, and a threat model, and perhaps others may disagree, but this is, for me, is very important, is a model of threats, not just a list of threats. So you can model something, some sort of design, and then say, okay, there are lots of this and this threat came out, but that's not really a threat model, right? So you just say, okay, your threat is sniffing the connection in that application, and it's not a model of threat. It's just one threat or a list of threats. A model is something that when you change something later in the design, for instance, you can see, okay, my threat landscape changes in some way. I show you how that looks like later when you look at it in a tool. So And when we talk about different kind of methodologies for threat modeling, there are lots around. And when you see threat modeling talks, the one may tell you something which sounds a bit completely different to what the other one said. I try to do this to make it a bit clearer on this slide here. So some people talk about risk assessment, some are about threat assessment. So the truth is, so we have a risk assessment process that looks more or less this way. You have a structure analysis and then threat assessment where you identify threats and you determine risks and so on and so on. So threat modeling or threat assessment as part of this risk management process. And then you can have, and that looks more or less like this, decomposition, scoping. You identify risks, perhaps rate them and determine countermeasures for that. So that can be a part of the risk assessment or can be conducted by its own. That is in some organizations very important because, for instance, when you want to have this executed or conducted by developers, they're not allowed to do risk assessments in their organizations. They can just identify security problems, potential security problems. So they would more tend to do a threat modeling or threat assessment, not a risk assessment often. So that's often a political thing as well. So, and then when we look at this process, one aspect, one step is very important where you have lots of different kind of tools and techniques, and that is the threat identification. And here are just a few examples that you might have heard already. One is misuse, abuse cases. One important is threat patterns, questionnaires that you can fill out for identifying threats, and one are data flow analysis. So there's a different kind of techniques you can do to identify threats, sometimes the same threats, sometimes different threats. For instance, abuse cases, something that you would more or less use for things in the business logic use cases, and data flow, as we see it now, is a bit more system-centric. So, and when we look at tools for these three different threat identification techniques, normally when you have this conducted by some kind of external consultant, it's more or less very often these tools that they will use, Microsoft Visio, Microsoft Word, Excel for questionnaires perhaps. So in many organizations that I was in and saw threat models from different kind of companies, they were mostly Word documents, PDFs, or whatever. The problem with that is, of course, it's perhaps useful for an external consulting company, but it's very difficult if you want to integrate this kind of tool, Word basically, or Excel sheet into a process. So when we look for consistency, so we want to have a real model, ease of use, so we often have the fact that we want to have non-security experts be able to conduct threat assessments, and we want to map this to our custom environment, map our threat intelligence to it. Yeah. So there are a couple, and that's really not many tools that are threat modeling tools. I'm not so sure if we can actually name the first one for Microsoft Elevation. That's basically a card game, but more or less the Iris Risk Threat Modeler and Microsoft Threat Modeling tool that are really threat modeling tools that I'm aware of. Perhaps there are more, but this is actually the list I'm aware of, so that's not so many tools out there. And this tool from Microsoft Threat Modeling tool, is the only one I'm aware of that is actually free, and we see that all these tools kind of map to a specific kind of identification technique, mostly. So now you know where we are in this threat modeling tool landscape. We can look a bit deeper into what data flow-based threat modeling is actually. This is a slide from Michael Howard. So the first, and it shows data flow elements that we use in a normal DFD assessment. external entities, processes, data stores, data flows. So that's nothing very security relevant. That's very security relevant that we use in a normal data flow analysis. Where the very much security thing come into play is these trust boundaries. That is very important for us for identifying security problems in the software design. And that says to us, okay, there's some kind of a flow. I'll show it in a minute in a tool to you that crosses this kind of trust boundary. So there must be some sort of validation applied or some kind of authentication to it. I show it to you in a second, as I said. So, and in this Microsoft world, they came up with this stride approach, which is basically just a classification for threats. Saying spoofing, we can classify them to spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, elevation of privilege, and you can map all kind of threats that you identify in the software design to that. For instance, denial of service is pretty much clear, elevation of privilege, privilege escalation, spoofing, tampering, something that you, some kind of data flow that you spoof. So, and the interesting thing that is this technique that Microsoft introduced is to map these kind of stride elements to these DFD elements, saying, okay, for instance, just to make it very short, we have a data flow. Data flow can be potentially tempered, right? So if you have a HTTP connection, it can be tempered, or it can be disrupted, or you can sniff it. So that's basically this kind of what this mapping tells us. And there is a way to map this kind of element back to, for instance, OWASP top 10, but it's not very clear. So for instance, cross-site scripting, what is it? It's tampering, spoofing, it can be everything, right? So it's just, don't spend too much time thinking about this, but there's they're kind of relevant to each other. So, and Microsoft threat modeling tool, very short before I show it to you. It's a Windows tool that's problematic. I don't know if you are able to start it within a Wine or Docker container, but basically it's a Windows.NET tool, so you have to use it in a Windows platform. Unfortunately, it's free though. You can also share the templates and the models that I show you freely. And it has a very interesting and kind of confusing kind of history. So I think it started 12 years ago, and then it was first a Windows tool, Windows Fat client. Then it was kind of a Visio plugin, so you have to have Visio for this. And then later it was then back a Windows tool, so very a bit confusing now. When we look at the tool, it says it's Microsoft Threat Modeling Tool 7, so I don't know what happened with 5 and 6. But there's a download link, so you can download this there for free. Yeah, demo time. Let's see if I can start it. So that's basically how it looks like when you start it. You can then, I show the bottom part to you in a minute. Select a template that you want to use, and then you say, okay, create a model. So often you would, of course, open an existing model and change something. You wouldn't start on here by scratch. And then you have a couple of stencils here on the left, and when I close this, you will see that it's basically these DFD elements that we saw before. So we have a process, external interactor, a data store, flows, and then we have trust boundaries and borders. That is basically the same, it's just a different kind of stencil. So, and down there we have, for instance, as a general process, we have a web application. Let's see, if I find it there, we can say web application. And then we have, for instance, generic external interactor, so something externally. So there's a square here, a browser, a data store, for instance, a secret database. Then we can say, let's do HTTP. So that's a very simple application we see here. course, HTTP goes back. Then we need, of course, some sort of SQL. There is no SQL data flow in the standard template, so we use just binary. And oops, no, that was not good. So and that's very simple application, of course. And after this, we can click on threads and see, make it a bit bigger. A couple of threads that are already identified by this diagram, based on the data flows and the stencils that we use there. So when we go down, we see what kind of part of this diagram is affected by, what kind of flow is affected by this kind of thread. So for instance, make it a bit bigger, we have these stride categories there, tempering, spoofing, and so on. And we have here cross-site scripting, we have here spoofing, something spoofed. We have, what is more interesting perhaps, for understanding, elevation using personation. Should have something like spoofing again. So lots of generic things. It's just 10, so now let's imagine we have the browsers in the internet. We would, of course, add a trust boundary saying, okay, the data that comes from that is untrusted. So that's basically showed by this boundary here. But we can also put it a bit differently, like here, it's scope. So like it was a line, that is now a really boundary on this tool. And then we go back and see, okay, we now have a lot more threads, 21 compared to 20. And we have things like, what's one I was looking for, data flow sniffing. Somebody could sniff HTTP, of course, especially because we transport it over the internet, also over a trust boundary. When we do now things like, okay, we say, okay, HTTP is perhaps not a good idea. Let's don't do it HTTP. Let's use HTTPS for that. We can see that HTTPS. So HTTPS, lots of threads will be hopefully gone. So we have just 18 left. So the sniffing is gone, and so on. So that's basically how that works. I explained a bit what happens in the background in a second. And we have other things here that we see. So each kind of stencil has some sort of properties. So for instance, we can define something as out of scope, so that no threads will be identified for this. For instance, we have a component that is not part of the system, so that is used but really not part of the system, so an external component instance. Or we have lots of specific properties here. It's a bit confusing when you do this first time, so shared, backup, encrypted, send. Let's just do this one here, stores credentials, and we see that when we go back, we have a new thread here. There is this weak credential storage, and you see it on the right that there is a explanation for that. So obviously, by selecting this SQL database, SQL database, as a database where credentials are stored, this thread was identified. We can look at this and say, okay, let's rate it as it's already mitigated for some reason. Put a justification in that, blah blah blah, and then we can create a report on. Of course, we need to rate most of the. We should rate all these threads that we have. At the moment, it's quite a lot, so we have 43. And say, okay, that's relevant. That for that we have a mitigation in place that's not applicable or whatever, and then we can share this model to developers, to someone else, or we can create a custom report, just clicking here on things that are not started, for instance, and then we have a threat modeling report here as an HTML page. So that's basically how it works from out of the box. Now let's look at how that works in there. So that's basically the same functionality that you had in threat modeling tool 2014. And what comes with this new version, which really makes the tool actually really great, because we saw that we have lots of abstract threats that are perhaps not so much relevant for our specific system, and it's we have lots of properties there. We can open these templates. Template and model are both XML-based documents, and let's just open it there. And we see here we have the stencil. So we have again this structure. We have the processes, general interactor, general data store, data flow, and we can look at these, change everything. Show it to you in a second what makes this interesting. And then we have these threat types. For instance, we saw data flow sniffing, and you see the threat logic behind that. So a source is generic process. For that, to explain it a bit better, I need to show you a slide. So this logic works. That's basically this. So you always have a source that can be a specific stencil, for instance, a browser, or a parent, which is in that case a generic external interactor that you can map the logic to. And then you have a data flow. Data flow can also have a couple of properties applied to it. It may crosses a trust boundary with certain kind of attributes, and then it ends up at a target. Could be a specific type, web application, or you can go to a parent, in that case a generic process, and map all kind of threat logic to it. And that's basically what you see in that tool, and that's pretty cool for two reasons. For the first is you understand how this threat logic in that tool works. So you can say, we have a data flow sniffing problem there. Let's look at the rule, and you say, okay, it's mapped because we have a generic process there, and we haven't selected the flow confidentiality to yes. And this is, for instance, automatically be done by certain kind of stencils, and then now we see that works. For instance, we saw that this changes after we switched to HTTPS. And let's go to this generic data store, data flow. So we have data flow, and you see that we have here kind of properties that we map: confidentiality, integrity. That's something you can select for a data flow. Or you have things like this here, HTTPS, where this is kind of pre-selected. HTTPS already provides confidentiality, integrity. So this is by this kind of exclude filter is automatically identified as not relevant for a data flow sniffing problem. So that's great, because we can change everything here. We can change all the description. We can also add some kind of look and change properties that we can put into the model. For instance, we can define countermeasures and risks. And what makes it really great is we can also add new stencils. For instance, we can say, see it here, my app, right? So that's a new stencil now. And when we create a new model, hopefully that, so of course, it was there. So normally it's we need to select, of course, the right template for that. We create a model for that, and we see, okay, we have my app here. So that's, for instance, a specific stencil for a specific customer, SAP system, for instance, that we want to define threats for. Now let's go back. So what's this, I guess? my app, and now we can say, okay, let's define certain kind of properties there, insecure, whatever, right? Can do whatever we want here, yes, no, and then we can put thread logic on that and saying, okay, we have a tempering problem there that we want to raise, saying need custom thread, whatever we call it, and we can say, okay, when something has a source, see, source is, see, my app, then this kind of thread is raised. When we write this wrongly, we would see that we have a message there that say, okay, the model is inconsistent. So we can do this and say source, I think it has my app property, so we can add certain kind of ask for certain kind of properties that are selected there. So and after we do this, let's do it. Blah blah blah. We hopefully I saved it. Did I save it? So normally when we do this and then create a model by this, and we have built up a simple thread model with this stencil as a source, we would see that thread. I have an example for that made up. I think it was this one here. So here we have an example. I call it my special app. I had this simple thread logic mapped to it. And then we see I have here a couple of threads, call it special vulnerability in it. So it's really, really easy to implement your own thread model. You just have these parent and the stencil below that you can use, but it's really, really nice for creating your own thread models. And let's look at a little bit more a complex one that I used. So what I did is I found that by using this in this organization, we have this standard template, and there's lots of attributes that need to be answered. Let's go back to it once more. Sorry for that. Was the standard template. So we have here lots of stencils that are not so relevant for especially web applications, and lots of questions that need to be answered here. Running as input level, so developers were completely confused what kind of things they have to answer there. And so we look at this template and we say, okay, many of these attributes are not kind of mapped by any kind of thread logic at all, and some threads are just a bit weird. So the logic was a bit weird. So what we did is we took this template, and you can download it afterwards, so I give you a URL for that, throughout all kind of unnecessary stencils, thread logic, so it's very simple now. So you have a web application here, and you can just have some kind of properties there, but it's not just 20 or something, it's just 4 or 5 that you can easily answer. We now have a security gateway that we often have in large organizations. That we have here a web application firewall. It's basically here it's out of scope because we don't want to assess threats for the application firewall, but we want to have this in our diagram. This is this, and as you see, we also added things, new trust boundaries, so you can do whatever you want to map this to your environment. Also networks. Networks was something that wasn't there at all. For instance, we now have here Internet DMZ, and we have a shared environment, and then we have different kind of trust boundaries between them. So we can do this map, so a very complex thread model we can define not by just one diagram, but by many diagrams. And when we look at the results at the end, so this is all kind of combined to them. So you can go through and look at the problems we have. So that's really, really great, because at this template we use at the customer, we put all kinds of custom applications in it. We put lots of gateways in it. We put lots of SAP system in it, mapped lots of SAP thread logic to it. So everyone who uses this stencil then updates its the newest template and finds the newest threads. So that was actually really, really nice. The template is normally, so you have the model and the template. The template is what I showed you before, both is XML. It's copied into the template is copied into the model, so the model is just an XML file that you can share to your developers and check in, so that looks like this one. Right? So lots of things that you can pass when you want it. So, yeah, it took us a lot of work actually to get our own template that we can use in this organization without so much problems, so much confusing questions, and the template that you can download here is basically similar to that. It's not kind of customer-specific thread logic in it, but it's something that you can open and see how that works and use for your own organization. So as I said, we have you can download everything here. Lots of samples I showed you. You can download here. We integrated a lot of additional thread logic. For instance, no SQL injection was a topic, XXE, lots of gateways, trust boundaries. We changed a bit the thread logic. For instance, XSS sanitization was a bit weird, DOS logic, and so on. So that's pretty useful when you need a tool that you integrate in your organization. You want to have this your custom environment mapped to it. You want to have custom threads, custom systems integrated into it. For that, it's a really great tool, but you have to spend a bit of time changing this template. And yeah, and of course, it's just one tool. It's just this data flow assessment methodology. It will not be able to, of course, find business logic threads, for instance, so easily. There are other techniques like questionnaires or use cases that you may combine to it. And of course, it's useful for some sort of a target group, for some kind of a user. So it's a system-centric approach, and if you want to have a tool that helps you doing system-centric thread models, then I think it's worth having a look at this. Okay. I think I was pretty fast. Any questions? Yes, please.
What do you think how long it takes for some simple application like as described for the time, web server, SQL database behind, how long it takes to fill out the whole thread model?
Yeah, I mean, depends on if you rely on the standard template, which has lots of questions in it, or if you throw everything out of it and make it a bit easier to use. But, and it depends, actually, so we had lots of, so the first times we used this, was lots of question raised, so what kind of threat is this? Spoofing, never heard, or they think about like disrupting the system, how can this be? And so at the start, it's good because you of course realize so what kind of problems are perhaps handled by some sort of standard system. So the first times it takes a bit longer, but after you realize this, you would perhaps put a bit of this thread logic back into the template, and it gets faster and faster. Normally, so perhaps when you do this, I'm supported by some kind of tutor. It takes an hour normally to go very fast through this first thread model. It's not that much actually, but if you do this by your own, of course, you need to think a lot about these threads and what they mean. For a really large application, of course, it needs much more time. Yeah. Yeah.
So, have you tried like doing threat modeling like per layer for components and connecting them?
Yeah, so yeah, that's a bit complicated. Yeah, that would be really great, actually. So that's not supported. So what you can do is these different kind of diagrams, and then so for instance, you would have some things like this here, where you have it's connected to some kind of trading web app, and then you have another connection there or something internal in this trading web app that you model different here, for instance, trading web app, and you have different user connected to it, or you have internal logic, so you model a different kind of layer. But it's mapped by the standard name, so you gave it the same name. But you can't really do this like, okay, let's click into it and then I get back to a different kind of layer. So it's a bit restricted, I must admit. Yeah. But you can deal with it by using kind of different kind of diagrams, and then you can switch through this. Yeah. But we have a really, really large complexity. It makes perhaps sense to have really different kind of models, not putting everything in one. Yeah, I'm sorry.
So is there a way to export, like when you've done your web modeling, is there a way to export the requirements when you're developing your application to your web modeling?
Yeah, the what? Sorry?
So there is a way using this tool to export the security requirements.
Yeah, so what you can do, so what we added to this standard template was actually a new tag, so I showed it to you in the template. Called countermeasure. That's not in in the standard template. So you can add kind of countermeasures that you want to define, blah blah blah, and then you can create a report, and then these custom tags that you integrated, like countermeasure, like whatever. Yeah, you can name it whatever. It's part of this risk. So we also added here risk or team, so something like that. And they are all part of this. Sorry, I have to go back there. Part of this this document. So now I created this by this default document, but it would be here as a new countermeasure. So that's actually working. But of course, if you want to have a connect this to a kind of a wiki where you have all these countermeasures described, it's a bit difficult, of course. You can put here a link on it for this wiki where these countermeasures described. So there's no standard mapping for countermeasures. Although you can, of course, put this in the threat logic, as you have here description, you can also put different additional fields and say, okay, let's describe our countermeasure for that specific threat. That would, of course, work, right? And then you have a countermeasure for Java, for PHP, and that could work. You have a question?
Does the tool provide any guidance or a way to prioritize or rate?
The same, actually. So we found this a bit difficult. So you can have here investigation, needs applicability, mitigation, whatever. We found that to be a problem as well. So we added an additional field that is risk. Or you can call it whatever you want, priority or whatever. So you can do this by your own, and then you can sort for that and prioritize. Yeah, we added, but you can add it to your the own template. You can download this with this risk added, but risk property added. But you can, of course, open the model by yourself, put it in yourself. So you can put every kind of properties to it you want. Countermeasures, risk, priority, whatever you want. Team, Jira ticket, right? So that's pretty open. Right? Yeah. Yeah, it is, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I could definitely do it again. But there are a few glitches or issues.
Yeah.
For example, if on a rare occasion that you have a team that already has a DFD built, very rare. But if it does happen, is there a way to work that from the zero or anything like that? I assume not.
You mean from an older version?
No, usually they have Visio, DFD, or any kind of.
No. No.
An older version, is that possible?
No, I don't think that would work. Actually, we found it pretty difficult, but we described this, I described it on the webpage. To if you have a model and you want to apply some sort of completely different template to it. So, for instance, this template version is here, and when you want to apply something to it, a different template, you have to do this in the XML. That's described on the webpage. I refer to in the presentation, so that's possible, but this kind of thing is pretty difficult. Yeah, that's definitely one thing that's not very helpful. Other thing is that you just have these two areas, that you just have generic process, that we're a bit struggling with generic process and then web application, but not generic process, web application, and then another a level where we have application type 1, type 2, type 3, so that's also a restriction. Perhaps they changed this, but that's something, yeah, we needed to build our thread logic around, so yeah. And
There's another interesting change or progression, I would say, between this and older tools. I noticed the strike category is a single item, whereas a lot of times you have threads that are in more than one strike category. I know older versions could do that.
yeah, you mean by that a thread can fall into different kind of stride categories at the same time?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You mentioned before credentials exposure.
Yeah.
Sure, that's information disclosure, but that's also a smoothing thread.
Yeah, definitely. Elevation. I haven't seen it actually, so but this is perhaps more clear. I don't look so much on the category, the stride category, to be honest. I haven't seen it that there is a mapping to more than one category. I think, is it important for you? Because I never look at this, to be honest. So normally it's just doing, yeah. So I think a stride is a bit confusing sometimes, because it, especially when we have very some threads like the implementation threads like cross-site scripting, we would need a lot of stride categories to map, right? So as I said, yeah.
So you can import from the previous version?
If you can import it from the earlier version, I don't know. That could be, but I'm pretty sure that this is possible because the tool pretty much hasn't changed at all. It's just the template that's now a fantastic new function, but the tool itself is the same. The template looks pretty much the same, so it should be possible. As so we, how to share the template? So we we shared it with SharePoint. That's run into a couple of complications actually, but so at these one large organizations, we're working with a lot with these templates. We share it via SharePoint actually, and send it via email. So we don't have really good best practice for that. You would be able to actually put it into a repository because it's XML, so you can do that. Yeah, but yeah, since it's not binary, I think that would be definitely the best idea, because it's then you have a revision control on that. Right. More questions? No? Okay, thank you. If you have any more questions, please. Thanks.